Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle DiMarzo, the Curator of Education and Academic Engagement at the Fairfield University Art Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome to our conversation this evening Elizabeth Resnick, the curator and organizer of the exhibition that is currently on view in our Walsh Gallery, Women's Rights Are Human Rights, an international poster exhibition. If you haven't yet had a chance to see the show, it is up through April 6th. We are open Tuesday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., and we are always free and open to the public. And for more information, you can visit the exhibition's landing page at fairfield.edu/museum/women's-rights. And I'll also put that URL into the chat. Our speaker this evening, Elizabeth Resnick, is Professor Emerita in Graphic Design at Massachusetts College of Art and Design, Boston. She's a passionate design curator who has organized 7 comprehensive exhibitions, including the one that she'll be speaking about this evening. Her own posters have been included in the Mexican, Bolivian, and Warsaw Biennials and many poster invitational exhibitions. Professor Resnick is the author of numerous books, including The Social Design Reader from Bloomsbury Visual Arts, published in 2019, Developing Citizen Designers from Bloomsbury Academic in 2016, and Design for Communication, Conceptual Graphic Design Basics from Wiley & Sons in 2003. She has also published articles, reviews, and interviews across a number of scholarly journals in the field of graphic design and communication. For anyone who might be new to the platform or the Quick Live, feel free to submit any questions in the chat box while Professor Resnick shares her remarks, and we will share them with her after her presentation. And for now, please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Professor Elizabeth Resnick.
Hello. It is my honor to be here with you today to discuss the issues presented in the Women's Rights or Human Rights poster exhibition. But first, I would like to thank Executive Director Carrie Weber, who organized the exhibition at Fairfield University Art Museum, along with faculty curators, Rochelle Brun-Bevel, Elizabeth Hole, Johanna Garvey, and Anna Lawrence. And thank you, Michelle, for hosting this talk. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge my use of the generic terminology women, men, female, and male. By doing so, it is not my intention to exclude the women, to exclude the LGBTIQA plus communities. Gender-based inequality, violence, and discrimination exist regardless of a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. Now let's see if this is going to work. And it doesn't. Great, thank you. The big hurdle. All right, I'd like to begin. Women's struggle to gain equal rights, acceptance, and recognition continues to be a very long process. My traveling exhibition, Women's Rights or Human Rights, International Posters for Gender-Based Inequality, Violence, and Discrimination, seeks to shine a spotlight on these issues. In many countries, women's rights do not exist. Even in first world countries like the US, women are still discriminated against in the workplace, in education, equal pay for equal work, healthcare coverage, and family leaves policies. I borrowed the title, Women's Rights or Human Rights, from a speech given by Hillary Rodham Clinton at UN's 4th World Conference on Women held in Beijing, China. In her address, which was delivered on September 5th, 1995, Mrs. Clinton sought to closely link the notion of women's rights with that of human rights. She suggested that, and I quote, if the term women's rights were to be interchangeable with the term human rights, the world community would be a better place because human rights affect the women who raise the world's children, care for the elderly, run companies, work in hospitals, fight for better education, and better health care, end quote. Gender inequities remain deeply entrenched in every society. In many cultures, women have very little control over their bodies, with female sexuality largely controlled and defined by men in patriarchal societies. Sexual violence is often rooted in male sexual entitlement ideologies, and these systems grant women very few legitimate options to refuse sexual advances. Male entitlement can take different forms depending on the culture. Human and women's rights are violated daily as rape and brutality become armed conflict strategies. Women and children make up a large majority of the world's refugees. And when women are excluded from the political process, they become defenseless against abuse. The exhibition features posters created by men and women to acknowledge the vital role women play locally, nationally, and internationally in protecting and promoting human rights. These posters challenge religious and cultural norms and patriarchal attitudes that subordinate, stigmatize, or restrict women from achieving their full potential. They advocate for eliminating discrimination against women and girls. Through the lens of selected posters, I will examine the three threads explored in this exhibition and are mentioned in the subtitle: gender-based inequality, violence against women, and discrimination against women. First, gender-based inequality. The male guardianship system is part of Saudi Arabia's adherence to a rigid interpretation of the Quran. Despite the limited reforms over the last decade, it remains the most significant impediment to women's rights in the kingdom. Regardless of her economic or social class, every Saudi woman is adversely affected by guardianship policies. A man controls her life from birth to death. Every Saudi woman has a male guardian. It can be her father or her husband, her brother or her son, and they have the power to make decisions on her behalf, effectively rendering her a legal minor. Adult women must obtain permission from a male guardian to travel, to marry, or to even leave prison. Women regularly face difficulty in conducting various transactions without a male relative, from renting an apartment to filing legal claims. She is entirely dependent on the goodwill of her male guardian. Saudi Arabia has made some reforms to ease restriction on women over the last 10 years. Notable examples include allowing women to participate in the country's limited political space, actively encouraging women to enter the labor market, and allowing women to drive. They can now also attend movies and sporting events alongside men. While the reforms are a step in the right direction, the male guardianship system remains in place, impeding and, in some cases, nullifying the success of these reforms. The following three posters that I will talk about now reflect the issue of violence against women. Abuse Goddesses is the title of an arresting and powerful advertising campaign created by an advertising agency in Mumbai, India. The ads portray three Indian goddesses, Lakshmi, Durga, and Saraswati. They are shown in their traditional poses and adorned in silks, jewels, and crowns. The agency's creative team physically recreated these scenes inspired by popular hand-painted calendar images of Indian goddesses. Makeup was applied to live models to create cuts and bruises to their beautiful faces, a stark reminder of the violence against women that plagues India, a predominantly Hindu nation. The awareness campaign was commissioned by Save the Children India for its Save Our Sisters initiative, which is for to prevent sex trafficking among young girls and women. The caption underneath the picture reads, and I quote, "Pray that we never see this day. Today, more than 68% of women in India are victims of domestic violence. Tomorrow, it seems, like no woman shall be spared, not even the ones we pray to," end quote. Adjacent to this message is a telephone number to report domestic violence cases. The campaign effectively captures India's most dangerous contradiction, that of revering women in religion and mythology, while the nation remains unsafe for its female population. Over 100 million Indians, predominantly women and girls, are reportedly involved in sex trafficking. If the campaign's mission was to create a dialogue, it certainly succeeded. Many people found the imagery both meaningful and powerful. When the campaign went viral, media coverage inevitably led to a broad range of viewpoints. While some praised the image's impact, others felt uncomfortable with the stereotype of women as goddesses representing domestic violence survivors. While some people believe the campaign's overall premise was to expose the social hypocrisy and double standards within Hinduism, others thought it came at the expense of the religion's integrity. Both sides of the argument denounce domestic violence. The main objective towards the Save Our Sisters platform is that by portraying goddesses as domestic abuse victims, they are elevating women to an unnecessary ideal that they cannot achieve, setting up the perception that women must behave like goddesses to be respected. And when they fail to meet these standards, the women are punished. The conflict lies in interpreting how the goddesses are depicted and the assumption of their role in society. But domestic violence is not limited to or confined by a specific religion or caste. Instead, domestic violence is a non-religious crime prevalent worldwide, regardless of ethnicity, gender, age, region, or religion. The campaign does not suggest any particular or tangible course of action to bring about change. The campaign's goal is to create awareness that such violence happens rather than find or suggest ways to curb it. Hundreds of violent deaths of women and girls have been reported in Juarez City, Mexico, since the early 1990s. Juarez is a border city across from the Rio Grande River from El Paso, Texas. Many victims are girls and young women from 10 to 22 years old who come to Juarez to work in foreign-owned factories. They fit a similar profile. Almost all were slender and had dark skin and long dark hair. All were poor, and most were assaulted on their way home from work. The brutality of these murders is stunning. The women have been raped, slashed, strangled, crushed, maimed, dismembered, and mutilated. These crimes of such intense hatred destroy a woman's personhood and erase her very existence. In Mexico, socio-political practices such as machismo, characterized by male power and aggression, are widespread. Machismo, motivated by misogyny and sexism, promotes men's superiority over women and triggers extreme violence against women simply because they are women. After years of official apathy and police incompetence towards solving and ending these brutal murders, mothers whose daughters were murdered began to organize in the 1990s. Their efforts inspired many human rights activists and ordinary citizens to raise awareness about violence against women and the ongoing public insecurity. In the early 2000s, a concerned group of graphic designers from Mexico City invited their colleagues to express their outrage by designing posters with the slogan, "Women of Juarez demand justice." In celebration of International Women's Day on March 8, 2003, 20 years ago, design activists staged an exhibition of 60 large format posters in a Mexico City metro station to educate citizens about the murders and force the authorities to become more involved. Displays and exhibits are often mounted in these large spaces and viewed by vast numbers of people who usually do not visit museums and galleries. No one knows precisely how many women have been killed or kidnapped in Juarez, but gender-based killings continue to this day. Crimes go undiscovered, unresolved, and unpunished. So much so that homicide based on gender has generated its own official classification, femicide, in Mexico and much of Latin America. Femicide is not just the killing of victims who just happen to be female. It's a systematic violation of human rights. Whether through domestic violence or sexual assault, the victims of femicide are killed because they are women. In Mexico, gender violence is pervasive at the national level. More than half of all women have been victims of violence by men, either by strangers or by their partners. Of Mexico's 46 million women over 15, 66% have faced emotional, physical, sexual, or economic violence. 3 years ago, on Sunday, March 8th, 2020, millions of women and men flooded the streets of Mexico City to protest the ongoing and unchecked violence against women. The next day, on Monday, March 9th, millions of women went on strike and refused to work in a protest titled #A Day Without Us. Local, state, and federal government officials also joined in various demonstrations. These movements signaled to the authorities that not one more femicide will be tolerated, while activists activists have succeeded in putting violence against women on the public and political agendas, the mothers of Juarez still await justice for their murdered daughters. The following posters I will discuss next reflect discrimination against women. Female genital mutilation, also known as female circumcision or cutting, is a term that encompasses all procedures involving partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or other injuries to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. Female genital mutilation, or FGM, is recognized internationally as a violation of the human rights of girls and women. It reflects deep-rooted inequality between the sexes and constitutes extreme discrimination against women. This slide details the 4 major types of female genital mutilation. The physical and emotional harm is indisputable, usually performed by an elderly family member, a birth attendant, or sometimes a healthcare provider. The healing process can take months, and often the wounds never completely heal. In addition to the psychological trauma suffered by girls old enough to remember the event, FGM also causes urinary problems, infections, menstrual difficulties, pain during intercourse, childbirth complications, and in some cases, death. The World Health Organization estimates that in the 29 African and Middle Eastern countries where the practice flourishes, more than 200 million girls and women alive today have undergone the procedure. Multiple agencies of the United Nations and Amnesty International are collaborating with the World Health Organization to lead the change to end the practice as part of a massive campaign to eliminate violence against women and girls. The practice is at the center of social, cultural, and religious norms. Every culture has its standards for acceptability and attractiveness. In cultures where women are considered property or inferior to men, FGM is a way to promote virginity, marital fidelity, because it usually makes sexual intercourse extremely painful. In these cultures, the procedure has become synonymous with purity, modesty, and beauty, and is supported by both men and women. In some circles, a woman who has not had this procedure is considered dirty and unmarriageable. Since women do not have many options other than marriage in certain societies, their parents deem this procedure necessary to find husbands for their daughters. This poster series, created for Amnesty International by a Swedish advertising agency, illustrates the stitches and closures used in 3 types of female genital mutilation. Here, the rose is a metaphor for female genitalia, symbolizing the peak of youthfulness, sexual innocence, virginity, or purity. Creating an ad campaign to raise awareness on this subject was a unique challenge. Because of its intimate nature, using graphic images was not an option. Instead of pushing the boundaries on violent imagery or watering down the message with beautiful faces of poor young girls, The creative team employed a powerful solution that, in my opinion, expresses the outrage without degrading the viewer or the victim. Even though the practice of infibulation is almost literally pictured here, these ads have used strong symbolism and the power of imagination to ensure we won't stay indifferent, and we should not. When an advertising agency creates a campaign for an NGO like Amnesty International, its job is not to sell you a commodity or an experience. They want to mobilize you by making you aware of a painful reality that needs to change. The autocomplete truth was a very successful 2013 campaign for UN Women, the United Nations organization whose mission it is to foster gender equality and women's empowerment. Created by Meemak Ogilvy Dubai, this campaign strived to produce a discussion focused on the issue that discrimination and prejudice against women are still common problems throughout the world. Beginning the creative brainstorming process, the agency copywriter typed phrases related to women into a Google search and discovered startling results. To ensure these results were not only valid for the Middle East, the Dubai-based agency reached out to other Ogilvy offices in different parts of the world and asked them to type the exact phrases into Google and report back. The worldwide search results were remarkably similar. The idea for this campaign was simple: to incorporate the text created by Google's autocomplete function onto the mouths of women to illustrate the silencing of women's voices worldwide. 4 women were photographed for the campaign, each from a different region, to show that the problem is universal and not limited to specific geographical areas. The goal of the print and web ads was to demonstrate the pervasiveness of the stereotypes towards women and that the road to true gender equality is still blocked by ignorance. The genius of this campaign resides in its simplicity. A Google search is an action we all do several times a day. Once people saw the images, they immediately wanted to check the results for themselves. The ease of creating similar images from Google searches and sharing them has been a critical component of audience engagement in the campaign. In the light of these results, the campaign's goal was achieved. All media channels created one big forum where everyone was encouraged to discuss gender equality. The campaign made people rethink the situation of women today and brought the issue back into the global agenda. For UN Women, the searches confirm the urgent need to continue making the case for women's rights, empowerment, and equality, a cause the organization is pursuing worldwide. A significant attitudinal shift was ushered in with the new millennia. We have witnessed a formidable increase in women's visibility as impressive role models in every aspect of life. So much so that one would think that women have gained true equality. But this is only a smokescreen. Women still need to be paid equally to their male counterparts. Women are not represented in equal numbers in business and politics. And globally, women's education, health, and the violence against them are worse than that of their male counterparts. We see this in the news every day. However, significant improvements have given women real lifestyle choices in many countries. They can be astronauts, prime ministers, presidents, and vice presidents. They can attend university, and they can both work and have a family. In collecting these images, my goal was to touch upon the most critical aspects of inequality, violence, and discrimination that many women face daily. Domestic violence and its acceptance as the norm in many cultures, gender equality and its abuses, gender and race discrimination, and lack of equal pay and respect. Why do artists and designers feel compelled to create these type of messages? Artists and designers possess the skills and knowledge to influence human behavior. Anyone who works in the advertising industry can tell you that. And who among us has not been deceived and manipulated to choose one brand over another, one item over another, based on what we have seen and heard in the media? Whether a poster is physical or digital doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters most, ultimately, is that the message reaches its intended audience. For the posters that form the core of the Women's Rights or Human Rights exhibition, this message is imperative for all human beings. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I know one of the things that I think a lot of our viewers will be wondering that you might be able to expand a bit more on when you said in collecting these posters. I would love to hear just the process of how did you find so many posters from countries all over the world? What was your method in putting together the works that would form the original iteration of the show?
Thank you for that. It's a great question, and it's a really long answer that I'm going to try to keep as short as possible. Women's Rights or Human Rights is the seventh curated poster exhibition I have made. And in creating socio-poster exhibitions, the last four were socio-political poster exhibitions, I have made great contacts with the world's most talented and impressive and dedicated and committed artists and designers who do these posters because they feel a need to voice their concerns. These are not, except for the advertising agency posters, these are not commissioned. They come directly from the designers and the artists. And so when I decided that I wanted to create a show like this, I got on the internet and looked at the portfolios of many of the poster designers who have participated in my previous shows. And the other thing that's really important to say, that in all of the poster exhibitions that I have curated, I have done so as a faculty curator. And that basically comes down to the fact that I create these materials as a service to my university community. And since I was a teacher of graphic design and typography for most of my career, I wanted to find examples that had very strong concepts delivered in excellent visuals. As you know, there's a lot of crap out there. sorry, the word, but there it is. There's, anyone who has, access to a computer and digital software, and these days an iPhone or something like that, can make visuals. But not everybody can make really strong, powerful images that resonate with people. And so one of the things that I love to do is research and, of course, visual research. And so I was very fortunate in being able to collect this group of posters. I will say that I didn't get everyone I wanted. Sometimes I wasn't given permission to use them. But right. Because I'm quite known now in the international poster community, and I've proven that I am, what's the word? I'm losing the word. That I respect
a responsible curator.
Yes, that I am responsible for the work and make sure that it is seen in the way it should be seen, that people have trusted me and has allowed me to collect, to get this collection.
So what I'm hearing, especially for thinking about any students that we might have in our audience, another testament to the power of networking. So you're saying that because you had built these relationships in the past with these graphic design artists, you were able to call upon them and they already had a pre-existing relationship with you, which is very powerful.
Right. And for the most part, these posters already existed. Mm-hmm. And I was selecting them. I was creating, when you do a curation, it is very different than doing, say, an invitational poster exhibition. In an invitational poster exhibition, you invite people to create something. And because you've invited them, you have to include their work in it. And so although there may be a common thread or a common theme, in my opinion, it's not as powerful a statement as it can be. But when you as a curator make very definite selections of work that go to what it is you're trying to say, I believe that makes a stronger statement. So most of this work was selected, and in a few cases of a few people that I knew personally, who had not created work like this, they did create some work for the exhibition.
Well, one of the things we have done at Fairfield is that we actually have a blank poster on the wall because we are inviting Fairfield students to create an additional design for a poster, and we're asking them, I'm saying this for any students in the audience, asking them to address some element of maybe women's experience that they don't see reflected in the show, and then we'll select one and sort of add it to our iteration of the exhibition. So I wonder if you could say specifically for like a graphic design student or anyone who's looking to make a poster, do you start with the sort of concept that do you start with the image or the text? I guess I know it's always a tension in graphic design. There's usually words and there are images. And where do you tend to start as a designer?
Well, being that I was, a professor for so long, and I gave poster assignments out to my students, I'll talk to you from that point of view. Usually there's a theme. And if in this case, the theme is going to be women's rights or human rights, so it's going to be a theme, I would talk to my students who, because we're so fortunate to be in Boston, I would look out into my classroom and it's like the mini UN. So that's really great. And as we all know, there are many people who come, who have come to many families who have come to the US over the last couple of decades. And although their children are definitely US citizens, they also represent the cultures in which they are a part of, which makes this so rich. So what I would say to the students is, first, look to your culture. Look to your personal experience or to the personal experience of someone you know well. Do your research. Do research. It's not a matter of coming up with a cool image or a cool thing to say. Anybody can do that. The idea is to really give it careful thought as to what direction you think you might want to go in, and do the what we call brainstorming, or the process of writing things down, to just get out of your mind the things that you are thinking about, of the possible directions your idea might take. And you shouldn't just come upon one and go, okay, that's it, I'm going to make something cool, but you should really take your time and really thinking these out. For any of the posters that you might feel an affinity toward, whether you've seen them in this particular presentation, or even better, of course, in the exhibition itself on your campus, look really carefully. Many of them look fairly simple, but they are not. It's very difficult to say something very simply that resonates than it is to create something that has a lot of layers to it that nobody can understand. So I would always tell a student, start from personal experience.
That's great advice. And from what we've seen of the response to the exhibition on our campus, one of the feedback we've been getting is that people really appreciate how straightforward these images are, that they are communicating so directly, even though there's so much rich history and surrounding, often very painful context surrounding them. But the images themselves are very direct,
Yes.
which is perhaps a refreshing change from some of the more ambiguous art they might meet in a campus art museum. And I wonder if I could ask you, I know this is a hard question to ask a curator, but of the posters that you have worked with in this exhibition, do you have one or two that always come to mind as your favorites? So, for example, that might not have been your favorites that you showed in your presentation, but sort of off the top of your head, the one that really comes back to you is like, that is one that's just one of the ones that I like the best.
I am often asked this question. And I have to say, I have to smile, because I've selected them all.
So it's kind of like asking a mother to choose her favorite child, right?
Yes, it's exactly it. I mean, everyone that is in the exhibition, I asked for. I wanted, because I admired it, because it spoke directly to the message that I was curating. And also, as I had mentioned in my presentation, and it's in the curator statement as well, these posters are designed by and made by both men and women. That's, of whatever ilk. That is really, really important to know that it's not just asking women to respond to this situation, but men are, also a part of this. They're not only a part of the problem, they're a part of the solution. And they take this very seriously. And I think that's really important, that I emphasize that.
And I do have another question about some of sort of very few works in the show have a copyright listed on the label. And I was just wondering if you could comment on the distinction why some graphic designers would copyright their images and others would not, or at least would ask for the copyright to be included on the label copy.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. Technically, all of the work belongs to the artist or designer. They have given me permission to include it in this collection. That's the permission I have, that it remains, included in the collection. But they own the rights, the copyrights. So whether it has that symbol or not on it, it is still protected.
So maybe those are just some artists who have potentially encountered some situations where they feel the
Yeah.
broader public needs to be
Yes.
gently reminded that they possess the copyright. That's
In
interesting.
some ways, I could have just added that to all of them, and maybe I should. but I think it's these materials have been put out in the world to hopefully make a difference, to hopefully resonate with, and it starts with, if you will, young people. The best place for, although this exhibition has been in museums, I know that Fairfield is a museum, but it's a university museum.
Mhm.
It has been in non-university museums. But for me, the best place for it is in a university museum or gallery, so that young people can access this, so they have the opportunity to have a discussion about things they may be thinking about, or things that might bother them, or experiences they might have had that they feel they need to be able to talk about, or any of the above things that is meaningful for a young person as they're developing into the world. And so, if this work, or even a work in the exhibition, resonates with even one person, then in my opinion, it's a success. And that's what keeps these artists and designers creating these types of messages, no matter what they're about, whether they're going to be on climate change, which is really important, or or war, or any of the things that are happening today, that they feel impassioned to be able to say something about it. And because they have the skills and the talent to be able to put these messages together so that they might reach other audiences, they continue to do so. So I'm just saying the emphasis really needs to remain on the committed men and women who create this work and put it out in the world without the expectation that they be paid for it.
That is very powerful. And I think with that emphasis on the importance of young people, as we are an academic art museum, we're delighted that so many university classes have been using your exhibition. It's been
Excellent.
fantastic. And reminding everyone, open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 4. Come and see Elizabeth's exhibition in the Walsh Gallery in the Quick Center for the Arts. Only have it up until April 6th. So I just want to thank again Elizabeth Resnick for being here with us this evening. And we wish you all a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.